So I started going to multifamily meetups, learning about what multifamily was because I had no idea. And in that process, they're like, well, what are you doing? And most of them were like, they owned a duplex or they had a fourplex and they were looking to do something bigger. And I was like, I'm developing a 100-unit apartment complex. And all of a sudden people are like, whoa, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I just started doing it.
Welcome into this week's episode of the Dynamis Podcast. I'm really, really excited. I have a new close friend, Alan Underwood, in the studio with me, and we're going to talk about a lot of things. But before I dive into Alan really quickly, here's the deal. I do this every week for you guys because I want to lift you up. I want your lives to improve and get better, and I want you to break through these psychological barriers and ceilings that you have put in place for yourself. I want everyone to be better, to be autonomous, to be wealthy, prosperous, ungovernable. And the tax that I have for you guys listening to this show and me doing this week in and week out is that A, you continue to listen, B, you take 30 seconds and subscribe, give us a 5-star review, write us something nice. I read every single review, and bring your friend to listen to this show. And the second thing you can do for me is the first Tuesday of every month, I host an incredible investor meetup group called Tacoma Pints and Properties. We meet at the Narrows Brewing. We kick things off at 6 p.m. and things happen in that room. If you want to get to the next level, you have to build your network. And part of building your network is getting in proximity of killers who are doing big things because it rubs off. It's like osmosis. I can't explain it, but we've had a ton of deals turn through that room. So please come out. It's free, and the value that you're going to get is going to be invaluable for the rest of your life. Okay, guys, this episode, you need to buckle up, get a notebook, take notes, and get ready because you're going to walk away with some incredible nuggets. Alan is a new friend of mine through GoBundance. We met a couple weeks ago. We've hopped on some personal calls. Just his energy, his personality has motivated me to take massive action in many avenues of my life. In fact, the day I got off the phone with Alan, we had a one-on-one call. I got off the phone and immediately enrolled in flight school, something that I have been wanting to do since I was 9 years old, probably since I was 5 years old. I've been putting it off. I spoke with Alan and he said, what are you waiting for? Why not today? Why not today? When is the day? Tomorrow, the next day? When do you have it defined that you're going to do it? Just do it today. I got off the phone and I enrolled in flight school that day. In fact, today, this afternoon, is my orientation in flight school. Not only that, he inspired me to start meeting with attorneys for capital raising, to start using this podcast as a resource to get people on board with what I want to do and give you guys opportunities to come and grow with me. So buckle up, get ready to take notes because Alan is going to blow your socks off. We're going to talk about everything from purpose to capital raising to business to happiness to family to prosperity. And Alan is going to guide us with the flight path to fulfillment, prosperity through purpose. Alan, welcome to the Dynamis Podcast this week.
Tim, it is so awesome to be connecting with you again. I'm looking forward to this.
I am so excited too. Let me give you a quick rundown of Alan's bio. Alan is a passionate pilot. Alan flies for Angel Flight West, which is a program that is near and dear to my heart. I had a sister who had terminal cancer, and this program blessed my family's life. So I love seeing him. He's always on social media, flying his airplane around. It's incredibly inspirational. So Alan is a passionate pilot, entrepreneur, real estate developer, and investor. He loves public speaking and using his voice for good to make a difference in the lives of others. Throughout his career, Alan has built a reputation for launching and scaling successful businesses in a variety of industries, including restaurants, automotive, insurance, aviation, and real estate. However, what truly motivates him is giving back to his community. One of Alan's most rewarding endeavors has been his involvement with Angel Flight West as a command pilot and Arizona outreach coordinator. He's had the opportunity to use his love of flying to provide free air transportation to patients and their families who require specialized medical treatment far from home. As an entrepreneur and investor, Alan understands how to help people, businesses, and capital grow. He's currently inviting investors to participate with him in development projects in San Diego where they can realize returns of more than 35% on their investments and build momentum towards financial freedom. Alan is passionate about finding creative solutions to complex problems, and he believes that with hard work and determination, anything is possible. Whether it's through his work with Angel Flight West, his real estate development projects, or his involvement in the community, he is always striving to make a positive impact in the world. Alan, welcome, my man, to the Dynamis world. I'm so grateful to have you here.
Yeah, this is going to be great. You read through that and I think, wow, that sounds amazing. Doing it all was a lot more hard work, which I'm sure you probably got podcast listeners that are experiencing that right now. they're not looking in the rearview mirror quite yet.
That's absolutely true. How often is it when we're down on ourselves, we feel like we're spinning our wheels, we're not getting anywhere? If we took a moment to contemplate who we were a short time ago, even just a year ago, in comparison to today, the truth is that we are completely different in the evolution spectrum, right? We are evolving every single day. And we overlook that fact when we don't give ourselves enough credit. We start beating ourselves up for not going fast enough, not doing enough, because we're comparing ourselves to the next person instead of who we should really be comparing ourselves to, and that's ourselves.
Right. Or we're comparing ourselves to an ideal version of ourselves, which doesn't exist, right? We're still people. You deal with emotional roller coasters in just life. And so you stall a little bit on one day, and then all of a sudden you're beating yourself up over what you didn't do rather than looking at how far maybe you've come in just a short amount of time.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Alan, something that I really love about you is just how immediately authentic you are. From the very first time we had a conversation, I didn't know you from Adam. You didn't know me. You showed up and you just authentically said, Tim, this is who I am and this is what I represent. It was incredibly empowering to me. I love surrounding myself with individuals who are their authentic selves, who are not afraid to be vulnerable, emotional, to really perpetuate the natural tools that God has given to us. And there's something to be said about unlocking prosperity when you're in tune with that. And you are living a living representation of that as we speak. Life today for you is very different than it was just a few short years ago. And we're going to cover a lot of things here, but I really want to dig in on the front side of this episode with the meaningful, the human side of your interview. And as our listeners know, I usually send out a questionnaire to all of our guests before they come into the show. And that questionnaire involves, hey, if you were going to give a TED Talk that was 30 minutes long, what would you want to dig into? And I always love going through the responses because I never know what I'm going to get. Sometimes it's all about whatever this particular investor or entrepreneur is working on. Sometimes it's lessons learned. And every once in a while, you get somebody and you read their response and you say to yourself, okay, this individual has been through the storm. And I know they've been through the storm because the response to what really matters in a TED Talk, what they would devote their TED Talk to, has nothing to do with money, has nothing to do with a resume, has everything to do with humanity, heart, love. And your response just, I love this response, and I'm really excited to dig into it. You said to remember the little things. This is something that your dad would always remind you of before he died. Those 4 words are as good a guide to life, relationships, business, and happiness as anything you've ever learned anywhere else. So, Alan, what does remembering the little things mean to you?
Yeah, well, the first mental image, Tim, is that's what's on my dad's headstone, those words. That wasn't what I wanted to put on his headstone at the time when we were making those plans. Maybe some of your listeners have watched Princess Bride, but anyway, there's a line in there where Inigo Montoya's near the end, and he says, "I want my father back, you son of a bitch." That's what I wanted to put on my dad's headstone because that's where I was at the time. I was angry. I was really depressed. When we lost my dad, it was October 3 years ago. The September before that, we'd lost my father-in-law to cancer. And July or August before that, we'd lost my mother-in-law to cancer. So we had 3 deaths of parents in 2 years. We were in the middle of COVID, which was an extremely challenging time for my business, and my life completely collapsed in every way. Like I said, experienced a terrible depression. I was dealing with an extreme amount of grief. My dad and my father-in-law had been my mentors. Those were the guys that I leaned on when I needed advice on business or life, and all of that was gone. And the world was upside down. So um, remember the little things was something. I have letters from my dad going back to when I was probably 8 or 9 years old. My dad, when he wanted to communicate with us, usually would write us a letter. And often he would end my letters anyway. I'd have to check in with my siblings now, but he would end those letters with remember the little things. And all of those letters taught something about the little things. And it was those little things really that began to pull me out of the depression. I started during that time period a gratitude journal. That is one little thing that anybody can do that will absolutely transform your life is it forces you every single day to look up and look around. I took a slightly different bent on that, and I had a gratitude journal, but then also another little thing was I had to learn how to love myself again, or maybe for the first time. I don't know if I'd ever really focused on that before. So I would force myself to look back at my past and find something that I loved about myself. I would look at who I was currently and find something. And then I would look at the man that I wanted to be in the future. And I would write down those things as well. So every single day I was expressing gratitude and love. And those little things began to make big changes. And that's still something I do. This morning, that was my meditation practice. I still work on that.
I have a friend, my best friend, and I would call him a gratitude black belt. He is exceptionally gifted in focusing on gratitude, and his practices and explanations of implementing gratitude have changed my life, have changed other people's lives that I know of. And I started practicing this practice of daily gratitudes, and I'm curious, what does your gratitude routine look like? I've heard a couple people speak on gratitude. There's another Go Abundance Go Bro. His name's Travis Bell, and he's the bucket list guy. He does a daily gratitude journal. He does 5 gratitudes every day, and his rule of thumb is that he can't say the same gratitude twice ever because there's something new to be grateful for every single day. What does your gratitude routine look like?
I think it changes. So I'm not very static with some of those things. I continue to do the same thing, but it doesn't always look the same way. So for me, gratitude is a part of my meditation slash prayer every morning, and that I try and when I pray personally to make it only an expression of gratitude where I'm not asking for anything, where I'm just expressing gratitude. And I've had to get creative with that because there are things that I want, there are blessings that I need. And I've just had to learn how to reframe that and being grateful for what I feel like God is going to give me. So that's been part of it. Another thing has been this is where I'm still working on this, but expressing gratitude to others. We're not missing an opportunity. One of the things with my dad that is really still one of the hardest things is I was dealing with a lot of grief and depression before he passed away. And the last time that I saw my dad, it was a particularly hard day for me. And he had come over actually for my son's birthday. And for the first time that I can remember, I don't know if there's any other time, I didn't get up and walk my parents out to the car and say goodbye to him. I didn't give him a hug and tell him that I loved him. And the next day he had a stroke. So the last memory that I have of my dad was that I didn't take a chance to tell him that I loved him or thank him. And I don't want to have that memory again. I don't want to repeat that. So I'm not perfect at it. I'm still working on it. But I try in the interactions that I have with people, especially with my family, with my friends, people that I love, to find something about that interaction and just thank them for being a part of my day. So expressing that to other people, I feel like is the next evolution of where I'm going with that gratitude.
And seizing that opportunity in the moment, and also giving yourself grace, right? Like, we are not perfect individuals. Give yourself grace when you fall short in those moments, you know.
Yeah, I've had to do that a lot with that time period in my life where everything burned down. Tim, with your military experience, you would recognize this right away. When you're wounded, you cannot perform at your highest capacity, and nobody would expect you to. If you're on the battlefield and wounded, nobody in that group is expecting you to perform as if you weren't wounded. But for some reason, when we're wounded emotionally or mentally, we expect of ourselves, and sometimes other people expect of us to perform at a higher level than, or to pretend that we aren't wounded. And I've had to look back at the version of Alan Underwood that was dealing with the loss of parents and struggling in business and those things, and really wrap my arms around that version of me and express love to who I was at that time, that it was okay that I wasn't high performing in that moment. And it's okay when I have days now that I'm not high performing. I told you before the call, I had recently, just a couple days ago, a day where I felt my anxiety was running high. And I've learned on those days that it's okay for me just to step away, take a walk, go play with my airplane, things that I know are going to bring joy, and set down the rest of the things and give myself a chance to relax and to rest. And that's something I wouldn't have done before. I would have dismissed those feelings and just tried to push through and done more damage, quite frankly, than if I had learned those lessons earlier.
Well, everything that you're saying really can be boiled down to wisdom. The clarity that you have about yourself at the emotional level, your spiritual level, your health, that comes from wisdom, and wisdom comes from lived experience. And so you needed those adverse times. You needed those low moments, the times where you fell short, where you beat yourself up a little bit and learned from it to be who you are today, because you couldn't be accomplishing what you're accomplishing today if you didn't gain wisdom through those times that were maybe a little challenging, maybe you fell a little short. And so to me, it sounds like you have evolved through those experiences and have gleaned a lot of wisdom from them to be the capable leader that you are today. And you're going to continue to fall down. It's just, how do you give yourself grace, dust yourself off, and continue on after? You made a comment about gratitude. I struggle with this sometimes too. You said you try not to ask for anything. You really just want to show up and be thankful. And I wrestle with this often. And some of the best advice that I ever got from some spiritual mentors to me was, God knows the contents of your heart. Okay. So God knows if you're just self-interested and, only wanting to look out for yourself. But also, like, God, above everything else, just desires relationship with you. And so don't be afraid to ask. It's okay to ask. We want to be rooted in gratitude for what we have, but also don't punish yourself by abstaining from an ask, because God knows the contents of your heart and you won't get fed. A closed mouth doesn't get fed. So don't be afraid to ask there, Alan.
That's wise advice. I'll adapt my gratitude practice to include maybe being grateful for asking. So
There you go. There you go. You had made a comment to me right before we got on the call, and I'd love to recap. So during this time, your dad had a stroke. You were in a low point. At this time, you were involved with a car dealership. Is that correct?
yeah, I was 13 years into owning two car dealerships. So yeah, that was the business we were in at the time.
You had these car dealerships that were very successful and profitable, and you made a decision that ultimately your individual autonomy and health was far more valuable than those businesses. And you made a decision to leave those businesses on some pretty exceptionally favorable terms for the buyer. And you walked away. And you gave me a quick summary of timeline. You said 1 year ago you joined GoBundance. You mind recapping that really quickly? Because I think that's really important to the foundation of where we're about to launch the conversation into.
Yeah. So one of the things that I've learned in the last 3 years, especially, is the power of perspective. I can liken that to flying the airplane for me. When you're sitting on the ground and getting ready to take off, pretty much all that you see as a pilot is the runway in front of you. You've got the giant runway numbers, you've got the runway in front of you. And then as you lift off and gain altitude, the world changes completely to where you can see an extremely far distance. You notice details and things that you wouldn't have been able to see while you were sitting on the ground. And I've had some real moments recently. I don't know what it is about October for me, Tim. And this was just a realization today. October, either the 3rd or the 10th, a year ago, was when I joined GoBundance. And putting myself in a network of other men who were imperfect and striving towards not perfection, but improvement in business, relationships, health, has completely changed my life. Unimaginably so. I never could have imagined the impact that it would have had on a personal level within my family. None of the things that have happened within the last year were things that I could have even imagined while I was sitting on the ground a year ago. A year before that, in October 10th, I do know that date, was when I was licensed as a private pilot. Another life-changing thing. A year before that, on October 15th, was when I lost my dad. And I can tell you that on October 15th, I didn't have any idea that within a year I would be flying airplanes. Within a year of that, not only would I be flying airplanes, but I would be volunteering for a charity that provides life-saving services for people all over the Western United States. Or that I would find myself next week, I am presenting to GoBundance, the fund that we've put together with an ultimate goal of acquiring $200 million worth of real estate in San Diego. I never, ever could have imagined. I'm going to get a little bit emotional just thinking about that. From where I was 3 years ago, I couldn't get out of bed, Tim. I couldn't manage the business that I had. I could not show up as a husband and a father. I was completely wrecked. And in fact, I told my wife that on the day they were going to bury my dad, she should just throw me in the same hole with him because that's where I belong. That's where I valued myself then. So to be able from this point to look back and realize that exactly 3 years later that I have the opportunities, the relationships, the experiences that I'm having now is almost completely overwhelming to me. That is something I am so full of gratitude for. It's been miraculous. And there are undoubtedly people that are going to listen to this episode that are going through the worst experiences of their life. And I can just look back and tell them that it is extremely hard at those times. And if you can hold on just for a little while, if you can just find the little things that can bring just a ray of sunshine into your otherwise dark day, it will get better. And it'll get better a lot faster and a lot bigger than you can imagine right now.
Well, I just have to interject here and just take a moment and express an overwhelmingly extreme amount of gratitude for your life. And I'm not the only one. I guarantee you I'm not the only one. But I've known you a short time, Alan, and our interactions have been few. I can count on one hand how many times you and I have had one-on-one conversations. And in those conversations, your presence and your character and your vulnerability, your energy has been so contagious that it has launched me into immediate action in many avenues. Like I said, enrolling in flight school. I have an attorney call on Friday for setting up small fund to raise capital, integrating that into this podcast to go work on bigger deals together with my listeners. There's been so many things that I knew I wanted to do, but just being in your proximity motivated me to take that next step. And I just have to express to you my gratitude for your life and you holding on and going through that trial and tribulation. Because if that hadn't happened, I wouldn't have met you. And everybody has something to contribute. We've met a finite amount of times, and you've already contributed massively to my life. And so I'm just grateful. I'm grateful for the path and that you've walked and the inspiration that you've been to me in the short time we've known each other.
Yeah, thank you. It reminds me of when I was 21, I got engaged, and that engagement, we ended up breaking it off. And that was extremely discouraging for me. And I went to visit with somebody at the time, a church leader who I needed to know that I was okay, that like I hadn't totally screwed up my life by getting engaged and breaking off, which seems really silly right now. But in the moment, it was like this devastating thing.
We've all been there.
Yeah, I'll never forget. There was a chalkboard in his office, and he drew a little teeny circle right in the middle of the chalkboard. And he said, Alan, I just need you to recognize that this is your perspective. And then he took the chalk and traced the entire edge of the chalkboard. He said, and this is God's perspective. And what's going to happen is he's going to take this experience that seems so hard for you right now, and he's going to use it to do good in the lives of other people for the rest of your life. And that has been so true, not just with that experience, but what I went through, I would never want to do again. And I would never wish it on anybody else. It was horrifyingly awful. And it forced me to discover who I really was, and has given me the ability to see when other people are hurting and connect with people in a way that I never would have been able to previously. I wouldn't have given myself the time or space to do it. That's led to, I recently helped some friends buy a business, that's something he'd been dreaming about doing for his entire life. That's been a wonderful experience. It's led to great coaching opportunities, networking opportunities, transformational experiences with my kids. The list goes on and on. I can say that every good thing in my life right now has roots somewhere in every bad thing that's ever happened.
That's 100% right. And how we frame that adversity, this thing happened for me, that simple shift in the framing is the differentiator between people who are elite and people who become a perpetual victim and they never ever can get ahead. And that's very difficult. I'm not saying you just need to change your framing. It's as easy as that. I'm not saying that, but I am saying that we can weaponize our experiences, reframe them to serve us rather than hinder us. And I think a beautiful representation of this, and actually a great segue into what you're working on right now. This fund is so impressive. It's so cool. When you stepped away from the auto dealerships, when you were down, you were depressed, you were in this hole that you couldn't get yourself out of, it led to a couple weird opportunities that ended up catapulting you into this fund today. For me, if you're willing to share, it's really fun if we could give like a quick summary recap of how you ended up in that parcel of land that you're investing, which ended up turning the light bulb on for raising funds for this current ADU fund in Southern California. It's just such an incredible story. How it happened from down in the dumps, you walked away. We can't always see the puzzle pieces fitting together, but we just have to be faithful in the pursuit of forward. And if you wouldn't mind sharing, I'd love the audience to participate in listening because it's just so inspirational.
Yeah, absolutely. So I started a car dealership in 2007 and terrible timing. It was right before everything tanked financially. Another hard learning experience. We survived. We grew $1 million year over year in revenue for the next 13, 14 years. So at the time when I exited, the dealership was doing over $16 million a year in sales. We had over 30,000 Facebook followers, 4.9 or 5-star reviews across the board. At pretty much every measure of success, we'd done it. It was awesome. And then these personal tragedies, talk about losing sight. I felt like all of that had no value. And Tim, I walked away from that business with a lot less than $100,000 in my pocket. That used to bring a lot of feelings of shame that, like, how in the world can you take something that's producing $16 million a year and accept anything close to what I did? So the next TED Talk I'll do with you, Tim, is going to be how to make the worst, best decision of your life. That was absolutely a horrible decision. And it's also been one of the best decisions in my life. What happened after that is I had purchased a piece of property while I had the dealership that I wanted to turn into a shopping center, visited with an attorney. He helped me to see that the best, highest use of that piece of property was multifamily development, which I had no experience in, no idea what to do with, but I started doing it anyway.
I don't want to interject. I'm sorry, but just so the audience is tracking, you bought a piece of dirt. You went to an attorney and said, "Hey, Mr. Attorney, I want to turn this into a shopping center." The attorney said, "Alan, I love you, buddy. I think there's a better use that you're going to get paid more money. Let me connect you with this contractor who's going to do multifamily," correct?
Yeah, he wanted me to talk to a developer. And I pushed back and I said, no, I want to do a shopping center. And he's like, no, you really don't. And just call this guy. So I called him. He offered me twice for the property than what I paid for it. And maybe I was getting smarter faster at that time period. I don't know. But I said, well, that's awesome. And what are you going to do with it? And he said, well, I'm going to get it entitled. And I had no idea what entitlement was.
Can you explain that real quick to the audience? Like, what does that mean to get entitled?
Yeah, that's what I asked him. What does that mean? How do you do it? And he said, well, what that means is you get permits from the city to be able to build. So you've got to go through planning and zoning and design review and city council and all this stuff. And I said, great. What is that going to cost you? And he said, probably $300,000 to $500,000. I said, okay, so you're going to spend $300,000 to $500,000, get it entitled. Then what happens? And he had offered me $1.5 million for the property. And he says, well, then I'm going to sell it for $4 to $6 million. I said, wait, time out. So you give me 1.5, you put in another 500,000, you're in at 2. and then you double or triple your money? And he said, yeah, that's what I do. I said, awesome. Thank you. What do you need to do that? He says, well, you need an attorney and an architect. I said, great. I already have one of those things. I have an attorney. I only need to get the other one, and I'll figure out how to get the money to do the rest. And that's what I started doing. I had no idea at the time that designing and developing a 100-unit apartment complex was a big deal. I just thought, well, Dave's doing it, so that means I should be able to do it.
Honestly, it's in your benefit. It's in your benefit that you didn't know how big of a deal it was, because you might not have done it if you knew the headaches. So it's good that you had some ignorance.
What I've learned is picking up an experienced partner at that time in that journey would have accelerated things tremendously. But that's a lesson I hadn't learned yet. So I started going to multifamily meetups and just asking people what they did and learning about what multifamily was, because I had no idea. And in that process, they're like, well, what are you doing? And most of them were like, they owned a duplex or they had a fourplex and they were looking to do something bigger. And I was like, I'm developing a 100-unit apartment complex. And all of a sudden people are like, whoa, how did you do that? I'm like, I don't know. I just started doing it. And through that process, connected with someone that's become a good friend now. His name's Dallin. And he was working on putting together syndication to do some multifamily deals, invited me to help with that. Worked with him on that. That's where I learned about syndications and funds. We ended up having different visions for where we wanted to go. Have maintained a great friendship. In fact, I still talk to him just about once a week on what we're doing, and we collaborate on a lot of things. But I wanted to do something different and moved off and started actually doing some single family flips to just get revenue coming in while we were working on this development. Joined GoBundance, and in GoBundance met my current partner, Christian, and saw what he was doing in San Diego, which really is taking single family homes and converting them into small multifamily investment properties. And I was like, hey, there is a novel idea. Not many people are doing it. The returns are phenomenal. We should be able to wrap an investment around that. So Christian and I got to talking, and one thing led to another. And about 7 or 8 weeks ago, I guess, we started raising funds on our first fund. We've now acquired one property. We have offers out on two. We've raised over $1 million of the $4 million raise. We've got about another $2 million committed. So we've got about $1 million to go to close out that first fund. And I don't think any of that had happened, Tim, when we talked. We hadn't bought a property. We hadn't raised $1 million. And so it's just another example of how quickly things can accelerate when you're with the right people, doing the right things, treating people right, all of the little things that my dad taught.
So much to unpack here in so little time. Number one is just be faithful, okay? When you think that you're down and out, but you're feeling led, listen. Your intuition is insanely powerful. It's insanely powerful. Listen to that intuition. Get your ego out of the way. Say, Lord, just steer the ship, Lord. I'll pull up the sail, you fill it with wind and steer the ship. Look at the opportunity. I think as humans, we always want to know the outcome, but sometimes it's to our advantage to not know, but to be productive and move forward, right? Because look at what you're doing right now. And what you're doing right now is so cool. So you guys are raising capital, and essentially you have a fund or a syndication that is going into these high density areas where the zoning laws are changing, Southern California, high cost. You're taking distressed property, renovating it, and adding ADUs in the backyard, okay, and keeping investors in the fund and sharing profit, sharing the upside. So same thing as like a multifamily, except you're doing them on individual units and you're adding dwellings to increase profitability. Is that correct?
Yeah. And if you go into a multifamily syndication, you're going to be locked in 5 to 7 years. We're predicting 18 months is where we'll turn around and return 35 to 45% to the investor.
Now, how is that capital event? Are you guys doing like a refi, or are you selling these off?
No, we'll sell them.
Okay, you're going to sell them. So these are short term.
Yeah, short term.
Now, is there any plan to like build a portfolio of existing long terms that spit out cash flow to investors to kind of, I don't know, average out returns? Or is it simply distressed property, add ADUs, hold for 18 months and exit?
Yeah, we modeled it both ways. And here's what we came to is If we were to do the traditional refinance it, keep investors in, what happens is we gain a huge amount of equity at the completion of construction. And then we refinance it. We may return capital, but a lot of those profits are going to be locked in that property. And then we're returning on cash flow maybe 5% or 10% annually. Whereas if we sell, return all of those profits, and then have people reinvest about every 18 months, and I think we can get that down to 12 months, but about every 18 months, we're going to return 35 to 45%. So that over the course of a normal investment cycle, 5 to 7 years, rather than returning maybe a total investment of maybe a 50% return, we're going to be at like 250% as we recycle that money through. So I'm going to hold some property long term to have some cash flow, but that cash flow will be pumped back into this investment so that I've got both high yield returns and then some long term holds.
Now, is the reason that you're raising private capital and bringing them on board, why not just go get hard money or private money? But I would imagine it's probably cheaper to bring them in as equity partners over the long run if you're just going to recycle profits into new deal flow.
Well, it's actually cheaper for us just to go get hard money and do it all on our own. But there's two big reasons why we wanted to do the fund. Number one is the accelerating factor of bringing in other people's capital. I can do, rather than doing one house at a time or two houses at a time, the goal eventually is to do 100. And so we can do 8 or 10 or 15 or 20 at a time. The other thing is, I think people often underestimate the value of investing with someone else. Most of the people that I'm going to be investing with are doing other things that are also very profitable. And so it's a way of expanding our network and our connections and therefore our impact. And also selfishly, there's not a lot of other charities like Angel Flight West. And every one of these investors is someone that's like-minded. Likely they're looking for ways to reduce their tax burden, and that charity is a big way of doing that. And so it gives me an opportunity to connect and possibly really make a huge impact in a charitable way, not only for the organization, but then also for all the people that organization is serving, just like it was with your sister.
So let's talk about the deal really quickly. So acquisition, obviously we want to buy at a deep discount and we're going to add an ADU. How much are we typically targeting for a renovation budget plus the addition of a ADU?
I've modeled it to purchase properties on market, Tim. So if we get a deep discount, that's going to add to everything that I'm telling you. But we intentionally modeled it for on market so that our options were either buying a house that didn't need any renovation, or maybe because of the property or whatever else, it was at market value, even if it is a little distressed. So the very basic model is you buy a house for $950,000, and there's two neighborhoods in San Diego that we're working in specifically. So $950,000 acquisition. It's going to be a 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, nothing fancy, probably 1,200 square feet. Then our remodel budget is $50,000 to $75,000, which immediately brings up the value of that property to probably 1.1 or 1.2. So within 6 weeks of our acquisition, we should put the investors in an equity position so that if anything happened, we can exit or refinance pretty quickly and get everybody's money back to them.
Is that including the addition of the ADU, that 75,000?
No, that's just remodeling the primary home.
What's the ADU cost?
Yeah, ADU cost is going to be $250 to $300 a square foot.
Okay.
And depending on the property, we'll either be adding somewhere between 1,200 square feet, or the project we're working on right now is 3,000 square feet.
Holy moly. So that's a full house. So the typical ADU, are you looking for like a 2-bed, 1-bath, private entrance?
Yeah, so we have two models. We have a 2-unit model and a 4-unit model. The 2-unit model is a 2-bedroom, 2-bath, 800 square foot lower unit, and then a 400 square foot upper studio unit.
So it's like a duplex ADU.
Yeah. Yeah.
Amazing. Amazing.
You turned a single family home into a triplex.
Wow.
The property we're doing right now, because of the lot size, actually allows us to do 2-bedroom, 2-baths, and 2 studios, plus the main house. So you're taking a single family home and now turning it into a 5-plex. So we'll be in that project right around 2 million and expect an exit of about 3.5.
So just out of curiosity, when you raise this capital, it's a little non-traditional. So I'm curious, are investors earning pref during construction, or how is
Yeah.
that working? They are. Okay.
Yeah, either a 9 pref or an 8 pref, depending on what level you come in.
And then once you get COE, then how does it get split up after we're finished and we have tenants in place and they're paying rent?
Yeah, so 70-30, 70-30 equity after the pref to the investor, 30 to us until we hit a 40% return. And once we hit 40% return, it goes to 50-50.
Goes to 50-50. Awesome.
Yeah.
And then on the capital event, on the sale, on the exit, the limited partners, the investors, they get paid back first on the exit.
Yeah. Every property we exit is the same thing. And everything along the way, the investors always get paid back first. So we're last in the capital chain.
This is such an incredibly good idea. Like, so inspiring. Man, you've got my wheels really turning. And Alan, like, I'm sitting here thinking, what do I have that you need? Like, I'm just trying to find excuses to fit in your puzzle piece. I'm envisioning you and I like flying around in our airplanes one day, going to do something fun and working on something awesome together.
I can totally envision that too and would love to. We'll have some partners in crime in that because the pilot community is right now, everybody invested in the fund, Tim, happens to be a pilot. So, I'm going to have to just start a fund directed specifically at pilots.
I guess you are. I guess you are. Alan, you're just one of those guys that I don't know. I come across them and you just fire me up. You're just very humble. You're authentic. I just love what you're doing. And I'm very grateful for the opportunity to get to learn from you and follow along in your journey. I'm so grateful that you came on the call today. I would love it if you left the audience with a few places that we can get in touch with you, follow along on your journey, because I know that there are going to be people in the audience that are our listeners that want to know more about you and maybe even get on board. So where can people get a hold of you and follow along with what you're doing?
Yeah, LinkedIn is great. So it's the Alan Underwood at LinkedIn. Instagram is the same handle, the Alan Underwood. Also on Instagram, Plain Success, Plane Success. Soon, too, I'll be joining you in the podcast arena with the Plain Success podcast. So we're going to be talking to pilots, professionals, and entrepreneurs and helping them find hope, happiness, prosperity, and purpose in their life's journey. That's the next bucket list adventure for me there. They can also go to MTMGRP, that's short for momentumgroup.com, and schedule a call with me. And that can be about life investing or whatever else they need to talk about.
I love it. And for everybody listening, I'm going to put all of Alan's information in the show notes. Be sure to scroll below in the show notes, take a look, click on his links, go to his social media. Alan, tonight is my pilot introduction to flight school. So something you could do for me is you just keep your eyes open. If you come across a deal of an airplane for sale and you think, you know what, that's got Tim's name on it, you give me a call and let me know, because I got to find excuses to come fly down and visit you, and we can go have pilot powwows somewhere. So
yeah, I was just going to say, I need to come talk to your group up there in Washington. And
we'd love to have you. We would love to have you. This has been an awesome episode. Alan, thank you so much for your time. Everybody out there in the Dynamist world, we will catch you on the flip side. See you next week.